I'm Hallie, 28 female. I live in a small but comfortable apartment in the city, a little sanctuary I've built for myself while working as a data analyst. It's a job I love, finding stories in numbers, seeing patterns where others see chaos. That skill, the ability to trace a digital thread, would soon become the most important one I possessed. It all started when my ex-boyfriend, Julian, tried to ruin my life over a breakup he couldn't accept, leading to a moment where my entire future hinged on proving my innocence against his word. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our relationship didn't end with a bang. It was more like the slow, agonizing fizzle of a dying firework. Julian and I had been together for 3 years, and for the first 2, things were genuinely good. He was an investment banker, charismatic and ambitious, with a smile that could charm a room. I was a data analyst, more reserved and methodical, finding comfort in the logic and order of spreadsheets and code. We were different, but for a long time, it felt like we balanced each other out. He pulled me out of my shell, and I grounded him when his ambitions threatened to send him into the stratosphere. The problems started subtly. It began with little comments about my job, disguised as jokes. "Still playing with your little numbers, Hallie?" he'd ask when he came home from a high-stakes day of meetings and multi-million-dollar deals. At first, I laughed it off, but the jokes started to carry a sharper edge. He began to resent the time I spent on my projects, especially when I was working late on a deadline. He saw my career as a hobby, something cute I did to pass the time, while his was the real, important work that paid for our expensive dinners and weekend getaways. The truth was, I was good at my job. I was respected in my field, and I was on track for a major promotion. But Julian never saw that. He only saw the hours I was wasting that could have been spent catering to him. The arguments became more frequent, circling the same drain of his professional arrogance and my refusal to shrink myself to fit into his world. He wanted a partner who was also a cheerleader, someone whose primary role was to support his ascent. I wanted a partner who saw me as an equal. The final straw came during what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner. He had just closed a huge deal and insisted we go to Lucille, a restaurant so exclusive you had to book months in advance. The entire evening, he talked about himself, his genius, his foresight, his inevitable rise to the top of the financial world. I listened, smiled, and nodded, trying to be the supportive girlfriend he wanted. But when I tried to share some good news of my own, that I had been asked to lead a new analytics team at my firm, his reaction was dismissive. "That's nice, babe," he said, barely looking up from his phone, where he was already texting his colleagues about his victory. "Just make sure it doesn't interfere with the fundraiser gala next month. I need you there." Something inside me just snapped. It was the complete lack of interest, the immediate pivot back to his own needs. I realized in that moment that I wasn't a partner to him, I was an accessory. A well-behaved, intelligent accessory, but an accessory nonetheless. "I don't think I can do this anymore, Julian," I said, my voice quiet but firm. He finally looked up, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Do what? Don't be dramatic, Hallie. We're celebrating." "No, you're celebrating," I corrected him. "I'm just here, and I'm tired of just being here. We're done." The breakup was uglier than I could have imagined. His charm evaporated, replaced by a chilling vindictiveness. He couldn't comprehend that I was leaving him. In his mind, it was an impossible scenario. He oscillated between begging and threatening, one moment promising to change and the next warning me that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. When I refused to back down and moved my things out of our shared apartment while he was at work, his anger escalated. He bombarded me with texts and calls, his messages growing more and more unhinged. He accused me of throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me, of being ungrateful, of being a fool. When I finally blocked his number, the silence was a relief, but it was also unnerving. I knew Julian's ego was a fragile and dangerous thing. He wasn't the type to let go gracefully. He was the type who needed to win, even if it meant rewriting the rules of the game. In the weeks that followed, I tried to build a new routine. I threw myself into my work, reconnected with friends I'd neglected, and started to feel like myself again. My best friend, Ava, a sharp and no-nonsense corporate lawyer, was my rock. She had never been. Julian's biggest fan, always seeing the narcissism that lay just beneath his polished surface. "Good riddance," she said over coffee one afternoon. "You're better off without that dead weight. He was an anchor, not a partner." She was right, of course. I felt lighter, freer, but a small, persistent knot of anxiety remained in my stomach. I kept expecting something to happen. A dramatic scene at my office, a smear campaign on social media, something. Julian was too proud to let me have the last word. The silence from his end felt less like acceptance and more like the calm before a storm. The storm arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening, about a month after the breakup. And it arrived in a way I never could have predicted. It wasn't a public spectacle or a string of angry emails. It was something far more insidious, something designed not just to hurt me, but to destroy my credibility and upend my life. It began with a knock at my apartment door, a knock that would signal the end of my peace and the beginning of a fight for my own reputation. Julian hadn't moved on. He had been planning, and his revenge was about to be served cold, calculated, and with the full force of the law behind it. The knock came at just past 9 in the evening. It was a firm, authoritative sound, not the friendly tap of a neighbor or the rhythmic rap of a delivery driver. I was in my pajamas, curled up on the couch with my laptop, finishing up some work and half-watching a mindless reality show. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. But the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. With a sigh, I slid off the couch and padded to the door, peering through the peephole. My heart did a nervous little flip. 2 police officers stood in the hallway, their faces illuminated by the dim overhead light. They were both middle-aged men, their expressions neutral but serious. I opened the door a few inches, leaving the security chain latched. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice betraying a slight tremor. My mind raced through a dozen possibilities. Had something happened to my parents? Was there a problem in the building? One of the officers, a man with a graying mustache and tired eyes, held up his badge. "Ma'am, my name is Detective Miller. This is Officer Schmidt. Are you Hallie Parker?" "Yes," I said, my grip tightening on the door. "Is everything all right?" "We'd like to ask you a few questions," Detective Miller said, his tone polite but unyielding. "It's in regards to a complaint filed by a Mr. Julian Croft. May we come in?" Julian? The name hit me like a physical blow. The knot of anxiety in my stomach, the one that had been dormant for weeks, coiled into a tight, cold fist. Of course, this was it. This was his move. I unlatched the chain and opened the door wider, stepping back to let them in. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What could he have possibly told them? They stepped into my small living room, their presence seeming to shrink the space. Officer Schmidt remained by the door while Detective Miller walked further in, his eyes scanning my apartment with a practiced, observant gaze. "Please have a seat," I said, gesturing towards the armchair opposite the couch. My own couch suddenly felt miles away. I stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, hugging my arms to my chest. Detective Miller sat, pulling out a small notebook and a pen. "Ms. Parker, do you know why we might be here tonight?" "I have no idea," I said, and it was the honest truth. Julian and I broke up about a month ago. I haven't had any contact with him since. "Mr. Croft filed a police report this evening," the detective began, his eyes fixed on his notebook. "He's alleging that you vandalized his vehicle. Specifically, that you keyed his car, a 2023 Audi A7, causing significant damage to the paintwork on both sides." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the words. Keyed his car? The accusation was so absurd, so juvenile, that my first reaction was a short, incredulous laugh. "You're kidding, right?" Detective Miller's expression remained unchanged. "This is not a joke, Ms. Parker. Vandalism is a serious offense. Mr. Croft claims the incident happened sometime this evening, between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., while his car was parked outside his apartment building. He looked up from his notes, his gaze sharp and penetrating. He seems to think you did it out of spite because of the breakup. He mentioned that things ended on bad terms. The laugh died in my throat, replaced by a wave of cold dread. This wasn't a prank. This was real. Julian had actually gone to the police and filed a report against me. He was painting me as a bitter, vengeful ex, a caricature of a woman scorned. The audacity of it was breathtaking, but the reality was terrifying. 2 police officers were in my apartment, looking at me as if I were a criminal. "That's insane," I stammered, shaking my head. Whoa. I'd never do something like that. I haven't been anywhere near his apartment building. Not tonight, not since the day I moved out. "Can you tell us where you were this evening, Ms. Parker?" Officer Schmidt asked from his position by the door. His voice was deeper, more gravelly than his partner's. "I was here," I said, gesturing vaguely around my living room. "I came straight home from work. I've been here all night." "Can anyone verify that for you?" Detective Miller pressed. "Did you have any visitors? Did you speak to anyone?" "No," I admitted, my heart sinking. "I live alone. I haven't seen or spoken to anyone since I left the office." The 2 officers exchanged a brief, almost imperceptible glance. It was a look I couldn't quite decipher, but it made me feel small and defenseless. In their eyes, I was just another scorned lover, and my denial was just another predictable part of the script. Julian, with his tailored suit and confident smile, had probably played the victim role to perfection. He would have sounded so convincing, so reasonable, painting a picture of a crazy ex-girlfriend who couldn't handle rejection. "I understand how this looks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, to project an aura of calm and rationality that I did not feel. "But Julian is lying. He's doing this to get back at me. Our breakup was difficult. His ego was bruised, and he's a very vindictive person." "People say a lot of things after a bad breakup," Detective Miller said, his tone noncommittal. "Right now, we have a victim and a formal complaint. Mr. Croft also mentioned you sent him a series of angry text messages after you separated." My blood ran cold. "I blocked his number because he was harassing me," I shot back, my voice rising in frustration. "He was the one sending dozens of messages, alternating between begging and insulting me. I have them saved on my phone. I can show you." "We may need to see those at a later time," the detective said smoothly. "For now, we just need your statement. So, you're saying you were home all evening, from the time you left work until now?" "Yes, absolutely," I confirmed. He made a few more notes, then slowly closed his notebook and stood up. "All right, Ms. Parker, thank you for your time. We'll be in touch." And just like that, they were gone. I closed the door behind them, my hand trembling as I fumbled with the deadbolt. The silence they left behind was deafening. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, my mind reeling. Julian had done it. He had found a way to drag me into a nightmare, to tarnish my name and embroil me in a legal mess. He knew I lived alone. He knew I was a homebody, that my evenings were often quiet and solitary. He had chosen the perfect time to strike, creating a situation where it was his word against mine. And he was a master manipulator, far more believable in his righteous anger than I was in my flustered, panicked denial. I sank onto the floor, my back against the door, and for the first time since they had arrived, I allowed the tears of fear and fury to fall. The moment the police left, I scrambled for my phone, my fingers fumbling as I unlocked the screen. My first instinct was to call Ava. I needed my best friend, and I needed her legal brain. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice warm and cheerful. "Hey, Hallie, what's up?" "Ava," I choked out, my voice thick with tears. "Something terrible has happened." The cheerfulness in her voice vanished, replaced by sharp concern. "What is it? Are you okay?" I took a deep, shuddering breath and recounted the entire story, from the knock on the door to the absurd accusation and the chillingly calm demeanor of the detectives. I told her how Julian had twisted our breakup, painting me as a volatile, vengeful ex. As I spoke, the full weight of the situation began to settle in. This wasn't just a petty lie, it was a calculated attack on my character. Ava listened silently, letting me get it all out. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, the lawyer mode switch flipping on. "Okay," she said, her voice now calm and measured. "First of all, take a deep breath. You're going to be fine. This is classic Julian. He can't stand losing, so he tries to burn the whole world down. We're not going to let him." "But Ava, they believed him," I cried, pacing my living room. "The way they looked at me. It's his word against mine, and he's so much more convincing. He's probably already told them a dozen other lies to make me look unstable." "His word is nothing without evidence," Ava stated firmly. "They don't have any. They have a complaint from a disgruntled ex-boyfriend. That's it. Did they say he had any proof it was you?" "No," I admitted. "They just said he filed a report, but what if he fakes something? What if he finds someone to lie for him and say they saw me there?" "Let's not get ahead of ours." "Elves with what-ifs," she cautioned. "Let's focus on what we know. You were at home, you didn't do it. Therefore, there is proof that you were somewhere else. We just need to find it." "But that's the problem," I said, sinking onto my couch in despair. "I was alone. There are no witnesses. I didn't call anyone, no one came over. It's a gaping hole in my alibi." "Hallie, you're a data analyst," Ava said, a new sharpness in her tone. "Your entire life is about finding proof in the digital ether. Think, your phone, your computer, your digital footprint. You didn't just cease to exist between 6 and 8 o'clock tonight. You left a trail. We just need to follow it." Her words cut through the fog of my panic. She was right. I dealt with data trails every single day. I traced user journeys, analyzed behavioral patterns, and found meaning in time-stamped logs. My own life was just another data set. The sinking feeling of helplessness began to recede, replaced by a flicker of determination. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier. "Okay, you're right, let's think." We spent the next hour on the phone, brainstorming every possible source of digital evidence. We talked about my phone's location services, my laptop's activity logs, my building's security cameras. Ava was methodical, creating a checklist of items to gather. She warned me not to contact Julian or the police again. "Let them make the next move," she advised. "Right now, our only job is to build an airtight alibi." After we hung up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fear was still there, a cold undercurrent beneath the surface, but it was now overlaid with a data analyst's focus. Julian thought he had me trapped. He thought he had created the perfect he said, she said scenario, banking on the stereotype of the emotional, irrational woman. He had underestimated me. He had forgotten what I do for a living. He saw me as a girl who played with numbers. He was about to find out that I could make those numbers sing. The next morning, I called into work, telling my boss I had a personal emergency. I couldn't focus on spreadsheets and reports when my own life was in chaos. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every creak in the hallway made me jump, expecting another knock on the door. The accusation hung in the air, a toxic, invisible cloud. I found myself questioning my own memory, even though I knew with absolute certainty that I had been home. But the power of a lie, especially one told with such conviction, is that it can make you doubt your own reality. I tried to eat, but the food tasted like cardboard. I made coffee, but my hand trembled so much I spilled it on the counter. The image of Detective Miller's impassive face was seared into my brain. He hadn't been overtly hostile, but he hadn't been friendly either. He was a man doing his job, and his job was to investigate a crime. To him, I was a suspect, a person of interest. The most painful part was Julian's betrayal. It was one thing to have a bad breakup, to say hurtful things in the heat of the moment. It was another thing entirely to fabricate a crime and use the police as a weapon. He wasn't just trying to cause me trouble, he was trying to inflict real, lasting damage. A police record, even for something relatively minor like vandalism, could have serious consequences for my career and my future. It was a violation of a depth I couldn't have imagined, even from him. I thought back to our relationship, searching for red flags I might have missed. They were all there, of course, shining like bright, crimson beacons in hindsight. His possessiveness, his jealousy disguised as protectiveness, his need to be in control of every situation. I had explained them away, telling myself that he was just passionate, that he just cared deeply. I had been wrong. It wasn't passion, it was a pathological need for dominance. And when I had taken that control away from him by ending the relationship, he had retaliated in the most destructive way he could think of. My anger began to eclipse my fear. How dare he? How dare he use his privilege and his smooth-talking charm to try and ruin me? How dare he turn the pain of our breakup into a twisted game of revenge? I would not let him win. I would not let him drag me down into his petty, vindictive world. I pulled out my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. It was time to stop feeling like a victim. It was time to start fighting back. It was time to do what I do best, find the truth in the data. Julian had started this war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. My mission began with my phone. Like most people, I had location services enabled on my smartphone, a feature I rarely thought about. It was just there, humming in the background, helping Google Maps find the quickest route to a new restaurant or allowing my weather app to give me an accurate forecast. Now, it was about to become my star witness. I logged into my Google account on my laptop and navigated to the timeline feature. A map appeared on the screen, dotted with lines and points representing my movements over the past few days. My heart hammered against my ribs as I selected the date of the alleged vandalism. The screen refreshed, and there it was, a clear, undeniable digital breadcrumb trail of my entire day. The timeline showed my phone leaving my apartment building at 8:15 a.m. It tracked my route to the office, a straight, unwavering line. It showed my phone remaining at my office address without deviation until 5:47 p.m. And then, at 5:47 p.m., it showed my phone traveling directly from my office back to my apartment, a journey that took approximately 25 minutes. From 6:12 p.m. onwards, my phone's location was a single, stationary dot, firmly planted inside the geographic coordinates of my building. It hadn't moved, not an inch. A wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy washed over me. I took a screenshot, then another, and another, capturing the map, the timeline, and the specific address data. Julian's complaint stated the vandalism occurred between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. According to my phone's location history, a history tracked by satellites and cell towers, impartial and precise, I was across town, miles away from his apartment, for the entirety of that 2-hour window. It was a start, a very, very good start, but Ava's voice echoed in my head, build an airtight alibi. One piece of evidence was good. Multiple, corroborating pieces were better. I needed to layer the data to create a story so dense with proof that no one could poke holes in it. My next stop was my Uber account. I remembered that on my way home from work, I had been feeling too tired to face the crowded subway. I had splurged on an Uber. I quickly logged into the app and pulled up my trip history. There it was. A ride requested at 5:47 p.m. from my office address to my home address. The receipt was detailed. It included the driver's name, the car's license plate, the exact route taken, the duration of the trip, and the time I was dropped off, 6:11 p.m. I saved a PDF of the receipt. This was even better. It wasn't just my phone that was at home. It was me, physically delivered to my doorstep by a third-party service with impeccable records. My confidence grew with each piece of evidence I uncovered. I was weaving a digital tapestry of my innocence. What next? My building's security. I sent a polite but firm email to my building manager, explaining that I needed to review the security footage from the previous evening for personal reasons. I didn't mention the police, not yet. I simply stated that I needed to confirm the time I arrived home and requested access to the lobby and elevator camera logs between 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. While I waited for a response, I turned my attention to my laptop. I had been working when the police arrived. Could I prove it? I opened my company's cloud server and looked at my activity log. The system tracked every file I accessed, every change I made, every document I saved. The log showed that from approximately 6:30 p.m. until 9:05 p.m., I had been actively working on a quarterly performance report. There were dozens of time-stamped entries. File Q3 Analytics Report, XLSX, accessed by H. Parker at 6:32 p.m. File saved by H. Parker at 6:58 p.m. Comment added to cell B42 by H. Parker at 7:15 p.m. It was a meticulous, second-by-second account of my professional activity, all occurring at a time when I was supposedly out vandalizing my ex-boyfriend's car. I exported the entire log, highlighting the relevant time frame. By mid-afternoon, I had an email back from my building manager. He was happy to help. He sent me a secure link to a video file. I clicked it, my breath held in anticipation. The video was from the camera in the main lobby, time-stamped in the bottom corner. At 6:12 p.m., the footage showed me walking through the lobby doors, carrying my work bag and a tote of groceries. I smiled briefly at the camera as I passed. I then appeared on the elevator camera feed, riding up to my floor alone. The evidence was irrefutable. I was physically in my building. I compiled everything into a single, password-protected folder on a cloud drive. The Google timeline screenshots, the Uber receipt, the work activity logs, and the security camera footage. It was a symphony of data, and it all sang the same song. I was innocent. I called Ava and walked her through everything I had found. I could hear the smile in her voice. "Hallie, this is incredible," she said. "This isn't just an alibi, it's a fortress. He has absolutely nothing that can stand up against this." "So what do I do now?" I asked, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "Do I call Detective Miller? Do I send this all to him?" "Yes, but we do it the right way," Ava instructed. "Draft an email. Be polite, professional, and concise. State that you have compiled some information that confirms your whereabouts ing the time of the alleged incident and that you believe it will resolve the matter. Attach everything clearly labeled, and you CC me on the email." I spent the next hour crafting the perfect email. I let the facts speak for themselves without emotion or accusation. I simply presented the data, piece by piece, a logical and undeniable sequence of events. Subject, following up on our conversation, case. Dear Detective Miller, thank you for your time last night. As we discussed, I was at my home address during the evening of date, at the time the alleged incident took place. To assist with your investigation and clarify my whereabouts, I have compiled the following documentation, which is attached to this email. Google location history. Screenshots from my Google timeline confirming my phone's location at my home address from 6:12 p.m. onwards. Uber receipt. A digital receipt for my journey from my office to my home, confirming a drop-off time of 6:11 p.m. Building security footage. A video file from my apartment building's lobby camera showing me entering at 6:12 p.m. Work activity log. A log from my company's server detailing my work on a specific report from 6:30 p.m. to 9:05 p.m. I trust this information will be helpful in resolving this matter. Please let me know if you require anything further. Sincerely, Hallie Parker. I added Ava's email address to the CC field, attached all the files, and took one last, deep breath. Then I hit send. The email shot out into the digital void, carrying with it the weight of my future. It was done. I had laid my digital cards on the table. Now all I could do was wait for the police and Julian to play their hand. The silence that followed felt heavier than the one before. For 24 agonizing hours, my email sat unanswered. I obsessively checked my inbox, my phone's notification sound making my heart leap every time it chirped. I tried to distract myself with work, but the numbers on my screen blurred together. The fate of my reputation rested in a police detective's inbox, waiting to be opened. Ava was my lifeline. She called me every few hours, her calm, logical presence a balm to my frayed nerves. No news is not necessarily bad news, she reminded me. They're likely reviewing what you sent. This isn't a TV show where everything happens in an hour. They have procedures to follow. She was right, of course, but the waiting was torture. My mind conjured up worst-case scenarios. What if they dismissed my evidence as fabricated? What if Julian had an elaborate counterlie prepared? What if his charisma and my social awkwardness made him the more believable party, regardless of the data? The call finally came late the next afternoon. The caller ID showed a blocked number, and my stomach plummeted. I answered on the second ring, my hand clammy. "Hallie Parker," a familiar voice asked. It was Detective Miller. "Yes, this is she," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Detective Miller here. I received your email and the attached files. Thank you for sending those over. We've reviewed them." There was a pause, and in that brief silence, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. "The information you provided is conclusive. Your alibi is solid. We will be closing the investigation against you." The relief was so sudden and so overwhelming that my knees felt weak. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the phone pressed hard against my ear. "Oh," I breathed out. Thank you so much." "It's our job to follow the facts, Ms. Parker," he said, his voice now carrying a hint of warmth that had been absent before. "And the facts here are very clear. You were not at Mr. Croft's apartment. I apologize for the distress this situation has caused you." "I appreciate that," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Can I ask what happens now with Julian?" There was another pause. "Well," Detective Miller said, and I could hear the shift in his tone from procedural to something more serious. "Filing a false police report is a criminal offense, a serious one. It wastes valuable time and resources, and it can cause significant harm to innocent people, as it nearly did to you. In light of the digital evidence you provided, which directly contradicts Mr. Croft's sworn statement, we will be opening an investigation into him for that offense." I was stunned. I had been so focused on clearing my own name that I hadn't truly considered the consequences for Julian. I had just wanted the nightmare to be over. But now, hearing the detective's words, a different feeling began to bloom in my chest. A fierce, cold sense of justice. "I see," I said quietly. "We may need you to provide a formal statement about your breakup and the nature of his behavior towards you after you ended the relationship," the detective continued. "Your friend, Ms. Ava Chen, the lawyer you CC'd on the email, it would probably be a good idea for her to be present." "Yes, of course," I agreed. "I am." "Immediately, we will cooperate fully." "Good, we'll be in touch to schedule that." He paused again. "Ms. Parker, one more thing, off the record." "Okay." "You were smart to gather all that data," he said. "Very smart. In a situation like this, it's what makes all the difference. You protected yourself. Don't ever forget that you did that." With that, he said goodbye and ended the call. I sat in silence for a full minute, his words echoing in my ears. You protected yourself. He was right. I hadn't just been lucky. I had been methodical. I had used my skills, my intellect, to fight back against a lie. The feeling was empowering. My first call was to Ava. I relayed the entire conversation, and she let out a whoop of triumph. "I knew it," she exclaimed. "Oh, Hallie, I'm so proud of you. You handed them an open and shut case on a silver platter. And now Julian gets to see what the inside of a police station looks like from the other side of the table. It's poetic justice." We talked for a while longer, planning for the formal statement and celebrating the victory. When we hung up, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in weeks. The cloud of accusation had lifted, and the sun was finally breaking through. But the story wasn't quite over. I knew Julian. I knew his pride and his arrogance. The news that he was now under investigation for filing a false report would be a devastating blow to his ego. I could only imagine his reaction when Detective Miller contacted him, not to give him an update on the case against me, but to inform him that he was now the suspect. The confrontation I had been dreading was still to come, but the dynamics had shifted entirely. I was no longer the accused, desperately trying to prove my innocence. I was now the victim of a crime, armed with undeniable proof. The power was back in my hands. The evidence had been unveiled, the truth had been brought to light, and the liar was about to face the consequences he had so carefully prepared for me. The tables, as they say, were about to turn. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I suspected who it was. After my conversation with Detective Miller, I had unblocked Julian's number, a strategic move suggested by Ava. "He might try to contact you," she'd said. "If he does, don't engage, but it could be useful to know what his state of mind is." I let it ring, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. When the call went to voicemail, a notification popped up a minute later. The message was exactly what I'd expected, a torrent of frantic, whispered demands. "Hallie, pick up the phone. The police called me. They're talking about charging me. This is insane. You have to call them back. You have to tell them this is all a misunderstanding, that you were just angry and you overreacted. Tell them you don't want to press charges. Hallie, you could ruin my career, my life. Call me back. Now." The message was breathtaking in its arrogance. There was no apology, no remorse, only a demand that I fix the mess he had created. He hadn't keyed his own car, but he had single-handedly keyed his own life, and now he expected me to buff out the scratches. I saved the voicemail and sent a copy to Ava, who simply replied with a single, perfect emoji: a bucket of popcorn. The next day, Ava and I went to the police station to give our formal statements. We sat with Detective Miller in a small, quiet interview room. I recounted the story of our breakup, the harassment that followed, and the complete shock of the false accusation. I was calm and factual, letting the evidence I had already provided do the heavy lifting. Ava was by my side, a reassuring and formidable presence, occasionally clarifying a legal point or prompting me for a detail I'd overlooked. Detective Miller listened patiently, taking detailed notes. When I was finished, he looked at me with an expression of professional sympathy. "Thank you, Ms. Parker. Your statement, combined with the digital evidence and Mr. Croft's actions, paints a very clear picture of malicious intent." He explained the next steps. The district attorney's office would review the case, but given the strength of the evidence, he was confident they would press charges against Julian for filing a false report. "He's been trying to spin a story," Detective Miller added with a sigh, "claiming he was distraught, that he genuinely believed it was you, that he made a mistake. But the evidence of your location is absolute. There's no room for mistake here." Leaving the station, I felt as if a physical weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The legal process was in motion, and I had done everything I could. The rest was out of my hands. The real comeuppance, however, came from an entirely different and unexpected quarter. Julian's entire life was built on a carefully curated image of success and prestige. He worked at a high-powered investment firm where reputation was everything. A crimin. I'll charge, even for something that didn't involve financial fraud, would be a black mark he couldn't easily erase. Apparently, when Julian had been formally notified of the investigation, he had panicked. He tried to use his connections to call in favors to make the whole thing go away. But the police department, armed with my airtight digital evidence, refused to budge. Word of the investigation began to leak. Someone in the department must have had a loose tongue, or perhaps Julian, in his desperation, had confessed to a colleague he thought he could trust. About a week after my station visit, Ava sent me a link to a local business journal's online gossip column. My jaw dropped as I read the headline: "Local investment banker under investigation for false police report in spat with ex." The article was short on specifics, but it had enough detail to be unmistakable. It mentioned an unnamed investment banker at Julian's firm, a false accusation of vandalism against a former girlfriend, and a potential criminal charge. It hinted at a pattern of volatile behavior. In the cutthroat world of finance, even a hint of instability could be a death sentence for a career. The fallout was swift. According to a mutual acquaintance who still worked in the same building, Julian was called into a meeting with his firm's partners and their legal counsel. Filing a false police report demonstrated a serious lack of judgment and a questionable moral character. It made him a liability. He was suspended indefinitely, pending the outcome of the criminal case. His photo and bio were quietly removed from the company's website. The news filled me with a complex mix of emotions. There was a grim satisfaction, a sense that justice was being served. He had tried to damage my reputation, and in the end, he had only succeeded in incinerating his own. But there was also a sliver of sadness for the person he could have been, for the good times we had once shared, before his ego had consumed him entirely. The final nail in his coffin was the car itself. His insurance company, upon learning of the police investigation into their client, launched its own fraud inquiry. A false claim to the police often goes hand in hand with a fraudulent insurance claim. His policy was likely canceled, and he was probably on the hook for the full cost of the repairs he had orchestrated. Julian, the man who prided himself on his intelligence and his ability to outsmart everyone, had been undone by his own petty scheme. He had tried to frame me, but the only person he had successfully trapped was himself. His plan had backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable, leaving his career in shambles and his name associated with a pathetic, vindictive lie. His comeuppance wasn't just about the legal consequences, it was about the complete and utter demolition of the image he held so dear. He had lost the one thing he valued more than anything else, his reputation. The legal proceedings against Julian moved at a slow, methodical pace. He ended up taking a plea deal, pleading guilty to a misdemeanor for filing the false report. He received a hefty fine, a year of probation, and was ordered to attend anger management classes. It wasn't a jail sentence, but for a man like Julian, the public record of the conviction and the blow to his professional life were a far worse punishment. His suspension from work became a permanent termination. The last I heard, he had moved out of the city, seeking to escape the shadow of his own making. For my part, I found a sense of closure that I hadn't expected. The legal system had worked, the truth had prevailed, but my real victory wasn't about Julian's downfall, it was about my own resilience. The ordeal had tested me in ways I never imagined, forcing me to confront not just a malicious ex-boyfriend, but also my own fears and self-doubts. And I had emerged stronger, more confident, and with a much clearer sense of my own capabilities. The experience changed my perspective on the digital world I inhabited. I had always seen data as something abstract, a tool for business insights and market analysis. Now, I saw it as a silent witness, a keeper of truths. My digital footprint, which I had largely ignored, had become my staunchest defender. It had told my story when I was unable to, providing an objective, unassailable narrative of my innocence. In the months that followed, I poured my energy into the things that brought me joy and fulfillment. I excelled at work, earning the promotion I had been so excited about before the breakup. I led my new team with a newfound sense of purpose, my confidence bolstered by the knowledge that I could navigate even the most stressful of situations. My friendship with Ava deepened. We had always been close, but going through this ordeal together had forged an unbreakable bond. We celebrated my promotion, the resolution of the court case, and the simple joy of a life free from Ian's toxic influence. We made a pact to always trust our instincts and to never again ignore the red flags that people so often wave in the beginning. One evening, about 6 months after it all began, Ava and I were having dinner at a new restaurant. We were laughing about something trivial when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a colleague, sending me a link to an article. It was a feature on rising stars in the city's tech scene. There, in the middle of the page, was a picture of me, smiling, next to a paragraph detailing my work and my recent promotion. I showed the phone to Ava, and her face broke into a wide grin. "Look at you," she said, raising her wine glass. "Thriving." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. She was right. I was thriving. The memory of Julian and his desperate, failed attempt to ruin me was now just a distant echo, a footnote in a much larger, more interesting story, my story. As a final, quiet act of reclaiming my narrative, I did something a little petty, but deeply satisfying. I knew from our time together that Julian, in his vanity, had set up Google alerts for his own name. I wrote a short, anonymous post on a local community forum, not about him directly, but about the importance of digital literacy and how things like location data and activity logs can be used to verify facts and ensure accountability. I didn't mention vandalism or false police reports, but I used enough keywords related to digital alibis and verifiable timelines that his alert would almost certainly pick it up. It was a small, symbolic gesture, a final reminder sent out into the digital ether that the very tools he had ignored were the ones that had ensured his undoing. It was my way of closing the book on that chapter of my life, not with anger, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the truth, had the data to prove it, and had moved on to a brighter, more promising future. The ordeal was over. I was free. And I was ready for whatever came next.